Welcome to the Nervous System Care and Healing Podcast, where we talk about how to take care of ourselves in mind, in body, in spirit, while we navigate systems that were designed to keep us dysregulated. I'm your host, Liz, a neurodivergent therapist of color, and I'm really glad that you're here. Today's episode is here to support you in building a healthy and expansive relationship to sex and intimacy in a way that acknowledges both your nervous system and the systems around us. I want to make sure I start with this. However you're feeling about sex is normal. Whether you feel curious, apprehensive, frustrated, confused, sad, overwhelmed, excited, neutral, or something else entirely, your experience and your feelings make sense. Please join me and my guest, Dominique, a certified sex therapist, as we discuss how traumas and systems of oppression impact our nervous systems, how our nervous system state impacts our sexual experiences, and why it can be hard to access intimacy and connection if our nervous systems are living in a constant state of dysregulation, and how, despite the systems of oppression that we're navigating, we can find ways to shift from dysregulation toward connection. This episode is meant to leave you with questions and ideas to explore so that you can bring more nervous system regulation into your life and expand your capacity for intimacy and connection if that's what you want. If you've ever been curious about sex therapy but felt too shy to ask, this episode is for you. Please do note that this episode includes brief mention of the impacts of power-based violence, such as sexual violence, as part of a broader conversation on systems of oppression. So please proceed with this awareness and be tending to your nervous system as needed as we go along. From here, please allow me to introduce you to our guest for today's episode. Dominique is a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified sex therapist who specializes in expansive sexuality and relationships. By helping clients to understand their unique historical, cultural, and psychobiological influences, she helps individuals, couples, and polycules to move beyond the unspoken expectations of sex and relating into more aligned and personalized frameworks. Her work as an adjunct professor focuses on teaching clinicians how to talk about sex from an intersectional and systems perspective with their clients, preferably without blushing. So, Dominique, thank you for being here.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for having me. I'm excited about it.
So, to start us off, could you share with us what is sex therapy? How do you define it? And why do you do this work?
Yeah. Okay. So I honestly think I answer this question differently every time somebody asks me, or like whatever the context is. But for me, sex therapy is just this really broad range of therapy. Like it is therapy. It's not some like separate fringe thing, but it's a way of engaging in therapy that includes your embodiment, your mindfulness, the way you show up intimately with other people, and focuses on your eroticism and libido and the ways that that can kind of show up for you. So my goal is to have people have better sex, safer sex, and more fun sex, and to be able to communicate about sex. Because what we find, or what I find, is that the way we show up sexually tends to be the way that we show up in general with things. So there's so many entry points for sex therapy, and it's attachment and communication and psychoeducation and regulation. So for me, sex therapy is kind of everything.
Um, yeah, and that's a great point that there are so many entry points into this work, and that the ways we might show up for our sexual lives actually mirror how we show up for other aspects of life. I'm curious if you have any examples you could share, generally speaking, of like what might lead someone to this work, or what do those entry points look like?
Sure. So for clients, it can be any range of things, right? So I think most common is going to be desire discrepancy. I work a lot with couples and relationships. So one person having a higher desire than the other, and then all of the friction and conflict and water under the bridge that that causes. So desire discrepancy is a huge one, but also trauma is another one. So we may experience sexual trauma, but we may experience all kinds of bullying trauma or, racism trauma, white supremacy, having, environmental trauma, and it really shortens and stunts the way that we're able to show up in our bodies and feel regulated with people. So often people won't know that there is a sexual impact. They'll come in saying, I'm so anxious, or I have these triggers, I have these wounds, I get really angry when something happens. And then we find out that there is this avenue of, oh, my body has been really misused and mistreated. And I'm playing that out in a lot of different ways. So, in healthy, loving relationships where otherwise they're like, why would this be an issue? We're dealing with desire discrepancy. We're dealing with trauma a lot. And then we're also just dealing with people saying, I'm kind of bored. I'm kind of stuck. I'm not really feeling alive in my body. And they'll come to sex therapy to figure out how can I get back in touch with my own body.
Yeah. So it could be this whole spectrum of trauma or like their sex life being directly impacted. Like there sounds like there are just so many things that could fall under the scope of this work.
Gosh, I think I went into this work because I've kind of been the person my whole life that is really interested in and talking, comfortable talking about sex. I remember even in high school, I would talk about sex with my friends and buy my friends vibrators and things when they were, in college and stuff, because I just had this idea that the way that we show up in our attachment relationship, of course, I didn't have language for any of this, right? I'm in my like 17-year-old brain, but sometimes we hold on to relationships for too long, or we stay in really unhealthy relationship patterns, or we continue to replay relationship patterns that are really based around this idea that the only place I get pleasure or oxytocin or connection or validation is in the sexual place. And we assign that to the other person. We don't realize that that's a capability that we have and that's something that we're bringing to the table. So I've had this feeling my whole life. Then I went into human resources, and it's great for understanding how people work, but not super fulfilling and, motivating in terms of like existential fulfillment. And then I realized I was a queer person. So I'm married. I'm married to a cis white man. I am a Black queer woman of color. And so being in this like really heterosexual presenting, really monogamous presenting relationship at a time where I was learning more about myself was like, well, I don't know anything, right? I don't understand
Yeah.
relationships. I don't know what I signed up for. I didn't know there were all of these options, and I thought there was something wrong with me. And then this kind of whole world opened up to me by reading, Esther Perel and Emily Nagoski and these other folks that I just found really so normalizing in terms of wanting more and wanting newness and wanting safety and also wanting your person, right? Also wanting your relationship. So I transitioned from human resources to sex therapy. I knew going into psychotherapy that I was going to be a sex therapist. I was going to work with people and accepting their, own unique variation of sex, whether that is queerness or trans identity or traumatized body or a polyamorous person. I feel like I've kind of embodied all of these places of suppression and oppression in myself and then kind of emerging and still being loved and still being accepted and building a business around this, I think is, I don't know, it's kind of like a lifelong fulfillment of I think who I was supposed to be as a very young kid.
Such a journey to go from that to where you are now and landing where exactly you're meant to be, maybe. I think a lot of us go into whatever we do for a personal reason, especially as therapists or healing practitioners. So that makes sense to me that that had such an impact on you in that way. So, kind of bringing us to the topic of nervous system, I wonder if you could share some ways that the state of our nervous system's dysregulation might impact our sex lives.
Totally. Okay, so this is one of my favorite things to talk about. I'm a big polyvagal theory guy. I don't know if you're a polyvagal. I know there's all kinds of, controversy and stuff about it right now, but I think at its base level, having people understand that their desire system and their arousal system is very intricately connected to their stress response cycle. And if we're in a dysregulated nervous system, if our bodies are feeling dysregulated, we're not going to be able to connect the way that we want to. So we'll have people coming and say, okay, we did the therapy, I did the communication skills, I've done nonviolent stuff, and I'm figuring it out, but my body still can't connect to this person, let alone like unhealthy relationships, set aside, conflict in relationships, even at its best. When I want to connect with you, but my nervous system has not been taken care of, there's some physiological things that are going to happen for me that it's going to make it difficult for me to connect. So, for example, when we have an abundance of adrenaline and cortisol and norepinephrine and all of these, stress chemicals that are designed to get us through the day and keep us safe, but we have an abundance of them and we don't have an opportunity to metabolize those chemicals. And then I come up to my partner and I'm doing the dishes and they're like, hey, do you want to have sex with me? And I'm like, oh my goodness, no, that is the furthest thing from my brain right now. And it feels very much like a rejection in the relationship, and it can cause conflict and it can cause, resentment and all this stuff. But what's really happening is that I may be saying no in this context where I'm still processing the day and I'm still in active, productivity mode. And you're asking me if I can meet you there, and my nervous system isn't there yet. If I were to try to connect with you, let's say we do move it to the bedroom because I feel, patriarchy tells me I'm a woman, so I'm supposed to show up and be available to you. And I try to make my body do it. And I have this abundance of stress chemicals. Not only is the touch that might ordinarily feel really appealing to me and really connecting to me going to start to feel abrasive, it's going to start to feel irritating, those like gentle caressing kind of touches. In an activated amygdala and like a really dysregulated nervous system, we're going to register that as kind of offensive. We're going to register that as irritating, kind of like nails on the chalkboard sensation instead of the connection, bonding experience that we would want. Not only that, but if you have a vagina, the cortisol is going to make it so that your vagina is one, not going to lubricate properly the way we want it to. And it's also not going to tempt appropriately for penetration. So if we try to go for penetration in, let's say we get the lube and we've got this, not shortcut. I proponent of lube all the time, but let's say we grab the lube because we're not physiologically prepared for sex and then we go for it. My vagina may not be ready for that. And if I have a penis and I have a bunch of testosterone, if I have abundance of adrenaline and cortisol, I might not be able to experience that kind of testosterone release in the way that I need to experience the erection that I want to have, or to kind of have the orgasm response when and how I want to have that. So we think that, oh, if I'm attracted to you, if I love you, then sex should be available. It should be spontaneous. I should be in my body and have this simultaneous orgasm like we used to when we were 25. But in reality, both of our nervous systems are doing their best to show up in this place with you, but physiologically, they're really not capable of connection. And that's why I love polyvagal theory, because it explains it so easily.
Yeah, and as you lay this out, it reminds me how the body is so wise that, like, of course, if it's holding this stress and it's like on alert for maybe other things that feel more urgent, that it then wouldn't be able to be available for like sexual intimacy, because that is a different type of activity and involves different parts of the brain and body than a stress response.
Totally, yeah, like, if I'm getting chased by a lion or if my building is on fire, I'm not gonna stop and be like, "Oh, I'm feeling a little bit horny right now," or, "I would love some intimate touch right now." No, right now it's time to go, it's time to run, it's time to fight the situation. There's no space for intimacy.
I wonder if we could talk about what are the bigger contexts and systems that actually contribute to so many of us being perpetually anxious or exhausted or dysregulated.
If our nervous systems are thinking that they're being chased by a lion, because that's exactly what's happening, right? We think that we're very, but it hasn't been that long. We have evolved from, being in community and running from lions and hunting for food and that kind of process and that kind of life, to very quickly having lions chasing us because we got caught off on the street, or because, we got an email from our boss that said something was incorrect, or a client cancels at the last minute and you're really worried about them. We are constantly getting this influx of stress chemicals all day long, and we're not really getting an opportunity to metabolize it very well. So we have all these things happening all of the time for us, and the systems that they're going to fall under is almost always going to be I call it kind of the trifecta. It's going to be white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy. So we're going to have white supremacy telling us who you're supposed to be, who has power, who deserves to have their needs met, who deserves to, invite and decline and to have access to things. So we're kind of always trying to find our power under that system, our desirability, our, body image and all that we show up to sexuality with. We also have capitalism that's telling us that you're supposed to be productive. You're supposed to be
Yeah.
doing more. You're supposed to exceed and like exceed expectations and excel in all of these things. And we're thinking about that constantly. So I may want to connect with you, but I've had a really long day at the office and I'm commuting really far and I'm thinking about this project I have to work on tomorrow or this feedback that I got, or I'm even treating you and this moment in sexuality as another example of how productive and how capable and how, wonderful I am. So I have
Yeah.
this outcome or this productivity focus rather than this intimate focus with you. So I'm constantly in my brain trying to figure out how can I achieve more and accomplish more and do more and be more. And that is directly under capitalism and how we've been trained to be, even with our sexuality. We have this goal orientation there. And then we have patriarchy, which is telling us again who's allowed to have power, who's supposed to want sex, what sex is supposed to mean. It really prioritizes certain kinds of sex, like penetrative sex, penis and vagina, or even anal sex if you're in, a gay male relationship. So it prioritizes certain kinds of sex as being, you know, the gold standard of things. And for folks who can't meet that because of, testosterone kinds of things or stress issues or, skill issues or attractiveness or power or cancer or any number of things, it's going to hit at our sense of desirability and the way that we're performing our role, regardless of your gender, right? I have a role to perform, to be desirable, to be desired, to have the right formula. So between capitalism, patriarchy, and white supremacy, all of these things are constantly working all the time. And we can say, no, I'm a feminist. Yeah, but there's still this other side that we are consciously acting against, right? I'm constantly actively trying to assert my power and I'm actively constantly trying to foster consent and validation and emotional understanding with people. And I also don't want to have this like productivity approach to the sexuality that we have. So it seems like it would be this overarching, really high level, I'm not impacted by the patriarchy or I'm not at work right now. We're on vacation. So it should be easier, but it's not that quick. It is a lifelong system that we are constantly swimming in. And people don't realize that when they're talking about the way that they have sex with each other.
Yeah, totally. These are all factors that are in the air. It's like in the waters, like the patriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism. So that even if someone isn't consciously aware or doesn't consciously believe that it's impacting them, what we're saying is like it's still embedded in like the culture and the society that we're all navigating. And I'm also thinking about how, like, this would, of course, impact folks with marginalized identities a lot. And it would also impact folks who also, like, their parts of their identities benefit from these systems. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really want all of my clients and then, my students when I'm teaching to understand as like their overarching approach to this is yes, we think about these things when we think about systems of oppression and how they impact marginalized people. And they do, right? They impact us in all of these ways. We know what they are, we can list them, but they tend to think it's only for people with marginalized identities and not that, I live in the Bay Area, I live in Santa Cruz. This is a very affluent, white, area, that's very productivity focused, very, generative AI who can do the most and produce the most. And people, even when they are trying to divest from the patriarchy or, they may work at Apple, but they're like, oh, I understand capitalism and I understand feminism and I don't want to do that. But you are still benefiting from this system and you are still being harmed by this system. You are being told that your value is in how much you earn. You're being told that if you're a stay-at-home parent, that your partner is earning more than you. So you should be the one who's doing everything domestically, that you should be the one who is constantly expressing gratitude, how lucky you are to be with this person who's taking care of you. And then we build resentment on all sides. So for when I'm working with men and they're really in this like, patriarchal role, but they're trying their best to undo it, we still want them to understand how not be able to intercept and take care of your body and slow down and understand what you are doing out of these systems or to appease these systems, you would kind of paradoxically be more productive if you were more regulated. You would be a better lover if your nervous system had slowed down. You would have more fun sex if you said no more often because you didn't feel obligated because you're the one being taken care of financially, right? There are all of these systems that tell us where my value is and what I owe as a result and what I should want that don't quite work for people. And they don't understand why they still feel so resentful when they're actively trying to not exist in that paradigm. But like you said, it's the water we swim in.
Appreciate the way you break it down. I'm sure people are wondering, like, what is a way through this? And how does one start to bring more regulation into their lives so that they can enjoy more intimacy and more of their sexuality without reperpetuating the systems that we're trying to divest from?
Well, I think even starting at that point of really having self-compassion that I cannot separate myself from these systems, I am in that, right? I cannot separate myself from white supremacy. I cannot separate myself from capitalism and patriarchy. I can recognize them when they show up. I can recognize my responses and my triggers to them when I see them. And I can start to intercept a little better. This is kind of the basis of my work with clients, regardless of what we're coming in for, even if it's, individual trauma work or sex therapy or nervous system regulation itself is where am I? Like physically in my body in time and space. Am I hungry? Am I tired? Have I, spent time in nature or with people who care about me? Am I being, is this a really busy work for me at week? Is it a busy week for me at work? Is my, my resources going to be used a little bit more? And we don't do that because we think that we're just supposed to feel our best and that's our baseline all of the time. And that's why I love polyvagal theory so much because I think it's a really accessible way for people to start to quantify how they're feeling inside. So I'll often talk to people about it as like a 0 to 10 scale. If we're using a subjective unit of distress, a 10 is the most dysregulated I can get. And I'm coming to a conversation or I'm coming to a sexual encounter with that energy. Not only am I not going to be able to meet you in the way that I want to meet you, but you're not going to feel met and safe with me. So if I can say, I'm at an 8 today. Like, I need a little bit of tenderness from you. I need a little bit of softness from you. You can't really expect a lot from me. If I can have one person in the relationship really understanding where they are on this distress scale, like, is it a 2 today? I've had a pretty good day. Like, I've been outside. I had some time to myself. I've got a lot of capacity, right? Sure, that day I may be able to respond to a bid for intimate connection a little bit more gently. I may be able to respond with enthusiasm or be interested in that. But if I'm at like a 9, I've had a really hard day, 10 is going to put me over the edge, and I'm writing that, I need to be able to come home and share with my partner, even your children, whoever, it's going to be exposed to you. Hey, this is where I am right now. And I need to know what I need to regulate myself from this to, a 4 or 5 or whatever my level of being able to engage with people is. And to do that, we need dopamine, we need serotonin, we need oxytocin. So the work with clients is really, where do you get these things? Where do you get your dopamine? What does that look like for you? Where do you get your serotonin? Where do you get your like feel good chemicals? Is it from exercise for you? Is it from, listening to music? Is it from dancing? Is it from doing some of those vagus nerve reset exercises, like moving the midline of your body? Does it come from having a cat purring near you? But what regulates your nervous system for you? Not so that we can kind of offload our, emotional regulation to our partners, but so that they know that this is kind of where I am and what you can expect from me until I can regulate myself more. A healthy relationship might be able to say, hey, you seem kind of like stressed out right now. Why don't you go try those things that you told me work for you, right? Or those things that you want to practice. Why don't you take time for yourself? Why don't you take the bath that you need to take? If I know how you can regulate yourself, then we're not in this codependent dance of, oh, I have to do this for you or I have to make this happen for you. But you understand where you are and what you need to bring yourself down to a place where you could communicate and connect and empathize and, be attuned to me because you can't do that in a dysregulated nervous system. So with me, it is all about understanding where am I on my stress response cycle and what would it take for me to regulate my nervous system again. And that is personal and bespoke to each person. For me, it might be having a margarita on the patio of a restaurant with my husband and talking shit as people walk by. For other people, it may be, a really gentle yoga session. And that's what we want to figure out for each person is there's not a right way to kind of calm and settle your nervous system, but you will know when it is regulated because we won't have disconnecting, disembodying, critical things happening inside of us.
That's a great example of kind of how to move through that whole process to become available for connection.
There's another example of this. Emily Nagoski has a book called Come Together, and she has this example, God, maybe 40 pages, something like that. And it's like a blueprint for a house. And it's like, how do you move yourself from one space in your house to another? And I love the example so much because some people don't like those, units of distress or how do I bring myself down. But if we're in a place where I'm in anxiety and I know that I need to move from anxiety to competency to restfulness to playfulness. And then I can move into like the connection, intimacy space. Then I can learn the process of what needs to happen emotionally to get me from anxiety to intimacy or from intimacy to productivity, right? Like I've got notes to do and I've got stuff to work on. How do I move myself from anxiety to where I want to go and understand that's just not an on off switch with the stressor, right? As soon as the is gone, that doesn't mean I'm suddenly going to feel sexual or I'm suddenly going to feel productive or sexy or whatever. That's going to take movement.
Yeah, and I think that kind of room to room, like this house analogy is helpful for people. It's almost like a map and seeing that, well, you can't get from like California to New York in a day. So like, why would you expect yourself to go from high stress, exhaustion and burnout to like, oh, now I'm turned on and right. Like there needs to be a process of like getting from one room to another.
Exactly. And yelling at you from the sex room and you're in the like dishes room. Like, hey, do you want to meet me here? And it's like, absolutely not. I'm not even in that part of the house right now.
I'm kind of looping this in with deconstructing the three big things, the patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism, and learning how your body regulates what each nervous system needs to move through the rooms to get to intimacy. I'm especially thinking about how emotionally activating it can be to start to unpack things and systems. And it can also be kind of overwhelming to realize all of these things. So I'm curious how this process can go for folks and any tips too from your experience.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. So I think one of the things that I always tell clients, especially like in our first session, like in the intake session, is that things are often going to get worse before they get better, right? We're going to have to uncover a lot of misconceptions and experiences and beliefs. And especially when I start to talk about self abandonment and sexuality, we talk about sexual trauma. People think it's these like big T experiences, but because of the system that we're in and what they tell us we're supposed to do, we have these like small T traumas happening all the time, right? Which is having sex for longer than I wanted to have sex. I was kind of checking out. I didn't, you know, decide to end that. Or I have these past experiences and I just kind of like burst through my trigger and I try to manage that or white knuckle through that. We have a lot of experiences that are continuing to manifest in our bodies as traumatic because of this performance orientation, right? Because I'm supposed to maintain a vigorous erection. So then the first thing that happens is the erection will start to fade. So people start pumping away to try to maintain that, but then often their partner might experience pain, right? Because you're no longer connected to me, you're not attuned to me, you're not seeing me, you're trying to maintain this erection. And that's based on patriarchy. That's based on what I think successful sex looks like, and that is penetrative to orgasm, right? So we may have these things that are physiologically challenging when we are operating under what I think sex looks like because of patriarchy. But then we also have this shyness, this embarrassment, this self-criticism of our bodies themselves, right? The way that it looks, the size, the hair, the smell, the anything that you can spend money on to, fix and change. Yeah, they're gonna tell you what's wrong with you, and we're gonna carry that. So we've got this capitalistic element of, "Oh, I wish my skin was shinier, and I wish my legs were smoother, and I wish my butthole was, bleached." And we create all these problems about ourselves and that they can sell you a solution to, and those are in our mind the whole time. Like, "Ugh, I shouldn't have eaten this morning. I should have done Pilates. I should have blah, 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 blah." So we have white supremacy. We have all these cultural expectations showing up for us. So we have all of these things, and then we have patriarchy, which is sexual violence, right? This is the rape culture that we live in. And when I talked about self-abandonment, I am talking about the ways that we try to keep ourselves safe, the unsafe things that do happen to us, the fight or flight and freeze and fawn responses that we have. All of these things are looped into our understanding of sexuality. Every experience we had where we felt like I was supposed to do more or do better or keep myself safe, or I should have said no, or I should have fought, or I should have done something else and I didn't. All of that gets lumped under sexual violence for us. So we start to build this association and relationship to sex and intimacy, even with our safe loved ones, as not safe, not about me. I don't have a voice here, right? Your partner may be desperate to hear what you like and want and what turns you on. But because you've had experiences in the past where you said, I don't like that, I don't want that, don't do that, and it happened anyway, that really gets overridden in the moment. So the culture of violence, the orientation around completion and performance, and then this kind of hierarchical power imbalance of who's supposed to enjoy what and have what even plays out in same-sex dynamics, right? We will still adopt gender roles based on, like who's the top or who's the bottom or who's the dog, whatever the thing is. We're still constantly playing out these systems in our sexuality. So there isn't a way to fix it or make it better, but I'm constantly telling people that you're not responsible for your first thought, right? You're responsible for the thought that you have after that. If your first thought is, my erection's going away, I gotta pump away. Well, okay, I know why I'm thinking that, but maybe my second thought is, maybe I check in with my partner and see if they're ignoring that, if that's what they want to have happen, if they want something else. Maybe my first thought is, I have to say yes to sex right now. My partner is going to be upset with me, but is that coming from patriarchy? Am I allowed to have a voice? Does this partner actually want me to have sex that I don't want to have, or are they actively trying to undo the system too? So, what feels true based on what I'm trying to accomplish in the way that I want to authentically show up sexually, and where does that buffer against the systems and what they tell me to be true? So, that's the work is, can I recognize the system and what it's telling me and recognize it as a voice outside of my own? I love parts work, right? I think it
Yeah.
is helpful for understanding this thing telling me who I'm supposed to be and how I'm supposed to show up is not me. That is coming from somewhere else.
That's so deep. The things we unlearn and the way we learn to kind of re-show up for ourselves and engage with our sexual lives can be an opportunity to stop playing out the micro and the macro versions of the systems and to actually create a new narrative. And even if no one is intentionally trying to re-perpetuate that, like the ways in which we might unconsciously be performing into those roles and to move
Yeah,
away from that.
absolutely.
Is there anything that you would really like listeners to have as a takeaway about like wherever they are in their journey of how to make sexuality more a part of their embodiment or regulation practice, how to be more available for connection? Anything that you want people to take away from this?
I want people to take away that however you're feeling about sex is normal, right? If you have a dysregulated nervous system and that makes you want less sex because it's eating up your testosterone or it's making you feel stressed and your vagina's not into it, great. Like that may be what's happening. And now that's a starting point. We don't need to have judgment about that or shame about that. We need to know that this is my experience. And because it's a chemical experience that I'm having, there are chemicals that can regulate that. There are things that I can do to help myself feel more available, whether that's chemically getting more dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin and feeling more regulated that way, or if it is just understanding that it's going to take me more time to regulate a dysregulated nervous system, that compassion for yourself is so helpful at like limiting the expectation that I'm just supposed to be into it. There are things that we can learn to regulate our nervous system if it is dysregulated. So we want to know, we don't want to pretend like I'm regulated if I'm not. I want to know exactly how dysregulated I am and know what tools I need to regulate my nervous system. And that may be different than my partner. My partner may need time together and I may need time apart. And that is just helpful for us to know is how can we meet each other where we are? And then that is the other thing, right? Is that we can meet each other where we are, but we're not necessarily starting in the same place. So my path to meeting you in the intimate space or my path to meeting you in the communication space or the let's be silly and play and go out space, I may need to move myself through different emotional lands or emotional spaces in my own landscape before I can meet you there. And it is okay to say, hey, I need a little bit of time to get from anxiety into, fun space. Can you help me with that by XYZ? Or can you give me some time to do that by myself? Because the last thing that we want is people feeling like my partner doesn't want me or they're rejecting me, when really what they're rejecting is pressure and obligation and performance orientation and dysregulation. What they're wanting is connection. And there's so many other ways that we can do that. And that's where sex therapy is really helpful, is figuring out and call it kind of a scaffolded approach. Sex may be up here for y'all. Sure, you want to have sex, you haven't had sex in 20 years. We'll get there. But do you guys hold hands? Do you cuddle? Do you have intimate conversation? Do you hold each other? Do you have eye gaze? Do you have other forms of intimacy that are regulating, that remind our bodies, I like this. I am interested in this. It's not just, hey, do you want to have sex? And now I'm rubbing you and you're like, ah, but can we actually get our bodies to a place where connection feels possible and it doesn't feel so loaded and goal oriented? And it can't be spontaneous if that's the case, right? Where our lives don't really allow for spontaneity the way that Disney movies have told us sex is supposed to be.
Yeah, if those movies were accurate, then it would take a lot more time and there'd be a lot more nuance and steps to get there.
In those movies, the credits roll when they get married, right?
It's the highlight reel, but not the actual whole life B-roll. One of my questions for folks is, what is one of your favorite ways to take care of your nervous system?
This was the one question on there that I was like, "Oh, no. What do I say for this?" It varies for me, like, I am a multifaceted queen, so, sometimes it is, yoga. I really like hot yoga, I like hot Pilates. I like it to be, like, intense and distracting enough to distract my brain from whatever thoughts it's having. Sometimes it's a cigarette in the backyard. Sometimes it is, my partner and I have this Wikipedia game that we just played recently. I really like things that are gonna distract my mind. I think that is something that people don't really recognize with anxiety, is that it's your brain trying to solve a problem. So give it a different problem to solve. So I love Jeopardy. I love, trivia and Wikipedia game kind of stuff. So things that are going to give my brain a different job to do kind of scratches that itch, one for, succeeding at something, at performing at something, but having a shared activity. I like to live by the beach. I like to be by the water, all kinds of stuff. It's not the same on any given day, right? It's going to change all the time.
I love that. There's like even spontaneity in how you would take care of your nervous system, or such a variety, which is great to have many different choices. If listeners want to connect with you, work with you, could you tell us how to get in touch?
So I'm licensed in California, so they're welcome to reach out to me at my website. It is domostertherapy.com, or they could follow me on Instagram. It's at Oster Therapy, Oster Therapy. I recently, all thoughts are my own and all that kind of stuff, but I recently became the co-president of Baylasta, which is a queer, kind of Bay Area focus, but we're really trying to expand out into California organization for queer therapists and clients to connect with each other. So if we're interested in, queer affirmative care or have any questions about that, they're welcome to reach out to me at the Baylasta website.
Thank you so much. This is such a wealth of wisdom for people to listen to, and really appreciate you coming on and sharing about your work. Thank you so much for listening to the Nervous System Care and Healing Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. And if you ever have a few minutes to leave a rating and review, it would mean so much to me, and it helps other people to find the podcast and spread the care. Please remember that this podcast is not a replacement for therapy, coaching, or professional mental health services. The information shared here is generalized, it may not reflect every individual nuance, and it should not be interpreted as personalized mental health advice. So please do seek out additional support if you need it. Take care and be well. This is Liz at Nervous System Care and Healing.